Hello, everyone, and welcome to Minnesota APSE's webinar on person-centered employment strategies. My name is Josh Dean, and I'll be your webinar host for today. I'm very excited to be here to have the opportunity to talk about this topic with you all, as I have a true passion for working with people with disabilities and helping them find meaningful employment within their communities. I've seen firsthand how finding the right job for a person using person-centered approaches can have such a drastic and dramatic impact on the quality of life for that person, both immediately and for the long term. I hope all the information that's going to be shared with you today is going to be engaging, informative, and relative to you and your role and the work that you do on an everyday basis. I've been asked to share a little bit about my professional background. I'm currently a trainer, consultant, and content expert on customized employment here in the great state of Minnesota. I've been in the field for over 10 years, and like many of you, I started off as a direct support professional, working directly with those job seekers to find jobs with the businesses in their communities. I've been transitioned into a role of a support employment manager, where I help build a sustainable program that's solely focused on community integrated jobs that were individualized and for competitive wages, and primarily working with individuals with developmental disabilities. I've been with Minnesota APSE as a board member since 2013, and I've also had experience doing consulting both on a national and international basis. Some of the cool projects that I've had an opportunity to work on is one was back in 2013, I was able to help successfully complete a PASS plan for a young man, a plan to achieve self-support, where I helped purchase a $17,000 ice cream machine for him, and he was able to then make ice cream for a local restaurateur here in the Twin Cities. I've also had experience helping to set up small businesses for individuals I've been working with, and I've also been certified from all sorts of professionals within the realm of customized employment, some of the best and brightest minds through whether it's Marco Associates, Griffin Hammis, Virginia Commonwealth University. I've had a lot of great mentors and trainers that have helped me throughout my career. I'm also a certified employment support professional through National APSE. It's a competency-based certification, and I would highly recommend the CESP certification for any employment professional out there, as it really has helped me in my career to advance myself, and overall it's just helped professionalize our industry and what we do. So what is APSE? APSE stands for the Association of People Supporting Employment First. It's actually a national organization, a national nonprofit that's dedicated to the mission of employment first. It has a vision that all people with disabilities has the right to competitive employment and to an inclusive workplace. The Minnesota board is comprised of service providers, agencies, self-advocates, educators, and family members. And we really invite anyone who shares the same values, no matter where you're at, to come join the conversation, and then also to take that one step further and to take action with us as well. So again, I appreciate everyone being here and chiming into this webinar, as that's one of the first steps you can take to be involved with Minnesota APSE. So why is Minnesota APSE hosting this webinar? Overall, it's just part of our mission to provide information and resources to the greater community at large. And we know that there's a need for more training such as this, and we're happy to provide this type of information and resources to all of you, as we want to have an impact on the services and the systems at large that are providing these services to the people that we serve. The more that we also know, the more that we can have a conversation around these topic points, around raising the expectations for people with disabilities, the more of an impact that we will have just on the service and support, but really more so the outcomes that we'll have for finding real jobs for competitive wages for the people, for the job seekers that we're working with. So what is the focus of this training? Well, it's really going to be to introduce person-centered job development. We're going to cover these 5 topics. We're going to next cover strategies for developing whole team approaches to job development. We're also going to segue into what the person wants versus what their team wants, and how do we kind of work, how do we cultivate that conversation, and how do we help facilitate that conversation to make sure that that person has a voice no matter what. I've also been asked to touch base on transportation options during the development phases, specifically in Greater Minnesota. And then I'm going to connect all of these previous bullet points to our new strategies, all these strategies to the new employment development services here in Minnesota as well. So with that being said, I just wanted to open this up with this quote, which is, how can you advocate for someone if you don't know who they are, what they want, and where they want to go? As person-centered suggests, it starts with the person. And I honestly think this is one of the best parts about this job is that you generally get the opportunity to actually work with these individuals and really get to know them and what they are all about, what they're interested in. And it's about getting to know them so we can best strategize on how to achieve their goals and what they want. I think this starts off with just building that trust, which is such a fundamental concept in any relationship, is taking the time to just say, hey, who are you and how can I help you? So that would be my number 1 suggestion in person-centered employment strategies, is just taking the time to get to know this individual. For those who know more about customized employment and other things like that, we really take a deep dive into getting to know a person, and we're going to share some different strategies around that as well, not specific to customized employment, but just in general. Also, I really do believe that as human beings, we are at our best when we are the most confident, and we are most confident when we have competency around something. And so with that being said, it's very important to recognize that a lot of the job seekers we may be working with may never have had a real opportunity to have a job. So they're not going to have that confidence yet because they've never done it before. And so, and also, I think it's important to recognize that for many people, they are only exposed to so much and to the jobs that they maybe see in the everyday community. When there's so much more, and we take a deeper dive into the communities, what type of business is there, and really what those needs of the businesses are. Tying it back, the goal for person-centered employment strategies is really real jobs, right? Individualized jobs, one person with one job. This means for minimum wage or higher. I really don't even understand how someone can get paid less than minimum wage, as minimum means the minimum, but that's another story for another time. Also, this real jobs happen in the community, not as center-based programs. It's not that those jobs aren't great opportunities, but really my goal is to help them find jobs in the community that are with real businesses. That means that individual, that job seeker, is going to become an employee and actually be paid by the employer, not a service provider. So with that, we're going to just jump right into the person-centered job development. As we talked about, it's going to just be one person at a time. We're really going to be meeting and accepting that person for who they are and where they're at. One-on-one services, I've seen doing one-on-one services has such dramatic impact for people and services. And this is coming from both as a practitioner and as a manager. I've just seen the group model before. I've worked with companies and consulted with companies that have tried the group model, and it's just not as effective as that one-on-one approach. I know that generally takes more time and resources up front, but the payoff in the end for that job seeker is going to be tenfold, because you're going to be able to individualize those services and approaches specifically for that person. Next, we just want to make sure that we're including and engaging the job seeker throughout this process, always making sure they have a voice within this, even if they don't speak, making sure that their wants and desires are known throughout it, and again, to have them engage through this process to whatever their level of comfort or ability is. What person-centered job development is all about is an individualized and strength-based approach. This is going to be a non-competitive, non-comparative approach towards employment. And really, again, we're going to just be discovering who this person is. What do they like? What are their interests? What are their skills? And where are their ideal conditions? What are their ideal conditions for employment? Excuse me. We're going to also identify transferable skills. Those are skills that happen in their everyday life, but that then can be transferred into business needs. And when we can identify those transferable skills, then we can start specifically targeting businesses that we believe those skills then happen in. And of course, the job seeker directs this whole process as well. We're here to help facilitate, to help guide it, and really introduce it if need be, and really guide them through the whole thing, making sure that, again, they have a say in every single thing that goes on. I always like this quote, but before I jump, or this slide here, but before I jump into it, Thomas Edison said that the way to achieve anything worthwhile is through hard work, persistence, and common sense. I really, truly believe that. And so for me, it doesn't mean that you need to have an assessment or you need to be pass the test to have a job. So for us at APSE, we have a new work readiness model, and really that is, as a job seeker, as a person with disabilities, do you want to have a job? And if that person just says yes, then it's our responsibility to help them find that job. They don't need to go through a work readiness program. Just by stating that they want a job should be good enough for us as professionals to assist them where they're at and help them achieve their goals. Excuse me. So one of the big things that I like to focus on as well is the contribution a person can make. Most of the time when I receive a file or reports on someone, that gives a great summary about the person, their diagnosis, some of their goals, and a list of the things the person can't do. But what we really need to be focusing on is what the person can do, right? It's not to dismiss any of that great information, but generally speaking, the service industry, the paperwork that we have to comply with generally talks about the limitations of a person opposed to the potential of a person. And I can tell you this from a business perspective, working with businesses all over the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota, they're not interested in what a person can't do. They're interested in what a person can do. And so as service providers, as professionals, that should be our focus as well. What are the skills and interests of this person, and how are they going to contribute to a potential business? So that brings us right into interest. Just another quote from Oprah: "Follow your passion and it will lead to your purpose." It's one of these things that no one wants to be working a dead-end job that leads to nowhere. And I understand that, yes, sometimes life circumstances force us to make choices that take something over nothing. But I truly believe there's a job out there for everyone that will meet their needs and help them grow as both a person and professionally and personally, and that can become the purpose for that person when they find that right job and they feel that value that they're bringing to a company because they know they're contributing to the team, to the bottom line, and to the overall goals of that organization. It's just so great to see when somebody is motivated, fire up, and is taking pride in their work, and they just want to go to work. And so that's why we take such an in-depth look about what the person is interested in. With that being said, we want to be taking interest in what their past, current, and future activities, what do they participate in? What do they naturally do all the time? Let's get away from the school. Let's get away from everything else. What are the things that they naturally do and are interested in? It's been so interesting to see some of the people that I've worked with that, again, have been assessed at one point that they may not be competitively employable. I go to their house and they're into 3D printing, or they're great artists, or they're into arts and crafts. They love social media. They love connecting to people on different forums. They write storybooks. And these are people of all abilities. And so it's just so great to, again, take that deeper dive into getting to know who this person is. We want to take a look at what are their hobbies, what are their collections. Do they like movies? Do they like comic books? Do they like heavy metal? Do they like cooking? What are they gravitated towards? And also, you want to take a look at some of the personal items in their life that have significance, asking those questions, because asking those questions can lead to different experiences that they can share that give you insight on who this person is and what they've been good at in the past and what they've learned in the past that can be relative to the job search moving forward. So again, taking a deeper dive is the best part about this process. Taking the time to get to know the individuals, and you're going to find such great information about the job seekers when you take the time and go past the reports. So again, the first step in person-centered approaches, other than believing, is taking an invested interest in the job seeker. But like any job, it's just not about our interests, it's also about skills. I think it's interesting. It's one of these things. So you're a Minnesota Wild fan, or Minnesota Twins fan, or Minnesota Vikings fan. But that's great that you're interested in it, but what do you do what are the skills involved that you do to get to show that, right? You can't get a necessary job just based on interest. You have to have some skills, but that can be a lot of things. Maybe it's maybe that job seeker who's a sports fan makes signs all the time. Maybe they dress up all the time. Maybe it's even as simple as, hey, guess what? I go to all these professional games and I buy my own tickets. I know how to navigate a computer using basic computer skills, being able to enter in credit card information, or let's say even printing off the tickets themselves. How about navigating the community, or even getting down to the game, whether it's using light rail, public transportation, or even metro mobility, right? These are all skills that are oftentimes overlooked, but something that, again, why we're taking a deeper dive into getting to know this person. With that being said, skills come. Best thing about skills is everyone has skills. It's one of these things where I've worked, again, with people who have been assessed that, well, they don't do anything. And then you go back to their homes and they have a set routine. They're doing different things, whether it's, I'm working with this young man who I went to his home and saw his afternoon routine. And he came home, he put his book bag away, he went and made a sandwich and a snack for himself. And then he went over to the puzzle room and put on jazz music and started to put together a 200-piece puzzle within a matter of minutes. It was just absolutely amazing. So these are the things, again, maybe not the fact that, it's not the necessary, hey, the ability to do a puzzle, that's a jigsaw puzzle, but, hey, being able to recognize the different pieces, right? Able to put them all together sequentially and form a bigger product. That is a transferable skill that, again, that's often overlooked. It may be as simple as, let's say, doing laundry, being able to sort the different laundry loads from whites to the colors, right? To using measuring out the detergents, to operating the machine. These are all different skills that are oftentimes overlooked. We want to be focusing on tasks the job seeker can perform, and really just breaking down what they're doing. So, for instance, this person, I've seen a lot of reports that when I consult, this person uses technology, and that's it. Well, elaborate on that. What technology do you use? How do they use it? What is, what are the different things that they do with the technology after they turn it on, right? Where do they get that technology? These are all things that take a deeper look into. And of course, once we identify these skills, we also want to verify them, which is such an important thing to do, right? If someone is great at doing landscaping, Well, just don't take their word for it. Obviously be enthusiastic, but then say, hey, when's the next time you're doing that? Can I come and see you mulching the front yard or mowing the lawn or raking the leaves or whatever that skill may be, getting the mail, walking the dog. Go and observe them, do it with them, and verify that those skills are there. And then once we identify them, let's translate those into transferable skills and identify, okay, if this skill happens in one place, where else does it happen as well? What kind of business industries? Support needs here is the next topic that we're going to talk about. I couldn't find an all-encompassing photo for support needs. So, and I was once told that people love cats. At least most people do. So if you can ever interject a cat photo into your presentation, do so. So I thought I would sneak one in here for the backdrop of support needs here. But support needs are really going to identify the ideal conditions of employment for a person. And one of the best ways to do it is not to reinvent the wheel. Where is this person at their best? Identify activities, environments the job seeker is or has been successful in the past. What's made them successful? What have been those X factors or variables, right? For instance, if somebody is cool, calm, and collected when they're working in a quiet environment, but maybe are impacted by anxiety and loud, noisy crowd environments, then let's stick with that smaller, quieter, quainter environment for work environment. Let's not put them out into that cliche greeter position or whatever it may be, right? Or customer service is a better example of that. We also want to reflect on what are all those factors that made that person successful. Did they have some assistive technology that helped them? Did they have more specialized or individualized training to learn certain concepts or methods or responsibilities, even expectations of that past activity? So again, reflecting upon those experiences to learn about what are those ideal conditions in the past that have been a good fit for that job seeker. We also clearly want to identify areas that we should be avoiding. Again, if somebody is more of a back of the house person, then let's not put them in the front of the house. Or if somebody is very passionate about working outside, landscaping, biology, whatever it may be, paper route, and hate the office cubicle type work, clerical work, then let's not get them a job inside, right? And vice versa. If somebody is more of a office person, they like that environment, then why would we get them a job doing construction, right? Also, I think part of the support needs is really coming up with the different solutions to the various barriers to employment. And again, this can be related back to simple accommodation using assistive technology, or just breaking down the problem and saying what are the possible resources we have in front of us, and how can we put together a solution that we can try to implement to meet these support needs for that individual. So next, we're going to talk about the whole team job development approach. Purely from a strategic problem-solving perspective, it's wise to identify all the resources at one's disposal and to come up with the collective plan on how to achieve the goal. For many job seekers, they're looking for a part-time job that they enjoy going to. I don't think it's an unreasonable request or ambition for any person, regardless of the ability to have this goal. I think it's music to my ears, actually, when somebody communicates that they do want to find a job in the community, that they're interested in it. And again, I think it's our job as a team to identify all the resources possible. Ultimately, I think that starts with breaking down the team and knowing collectively what we all do. Oftentimes, in team meetings, we're going to be introducing ourselves and our role, our title, and our name, and then we get usually to our paperwork and things that we do in terms of services, but we often don't really explain what our role is and how we can work together to best serve the job seeker. So just breaking down the team here, we have, this is not tried and true for everyone, of course, but just the average, the team or the typical team you may see may include a residential provider. This may be a residential group home. This may include supported living as in an apartment. It could be even living with a sibling or friends, right? You're also going to have a transition program at some point in time where you're going to have a lot of instructors, teachers, mentors involved that really have gotten to know the job seeker over the last few years. And also the peers. The peers are a great resource to tap into as well. If you can find connections that they've made in their transition program, that's something that we can kind of tap in vicariously through the teachers and the professionals. As I mentioned, family and friends, of course, who some of the best and most fierce advocates often come from family and friends. They know the job seeker and what they're really passionate and interested about. So it's always great to get their perspective on things as well. But with that being said, I think that sometimes family and friends can sometimes get too involved, right, with the process. And we're going to discuss a little bit about that as well, how we can, again, utilize and capitalize all these relationships, but also set the boundaries and set the precedent that, we are the professionals and that if we work collectively together that achieve this goal and focus on the job seeker, you're still able to contribute to have a voice as one of these team members, but it's going to have limitations to that as well. The job seeker may also have a BRS counselor or a placement specialist working with them as well. BRS really it could also be utilized to get further education or resources that are available for them. And also it can unlock a small business program for them as a potential resource. Then you move on to the service providers. This is not including residentials because we already mentioned that. But this is maybe typically more of the rec and leisure programs, DT&H programs, a employment provider program. Hopefully it's an employment program. And then also you're going to have but that can also include PCA services, ILS, things of that nature as well. You're also going to have a case manager, and most people, if they qualify for different funding, they'll have a case manager involved as well. Not tried and true that everybody would have all of these members to the group. And certainly I'm excluding some team members such as, let's say, a physician or a psychologist, things like that. So combination of professionals are going to, and personal relations are going to comprise the job seekers team. So I think one thing is working on a team as a team approach is accepting everyone for where they're at and making suggestions to the team on how to best collaborate. It's one of these things where when we actually start working together, again, being able to explain and say at the very beginning, and this is what I can do for the team, for the job seeker, is a great way to start off a meeting. So that's just one suggestion for an employment strategy that you can start implementing right away is how to facilitate a meeting. I'm going to go a little bit more into that in the next few slides. So with that being said, things to ask each party, as I mentioned, what is your role? What are your services and service limitations? I think both of those are equally important. So what are your services, but what are your service limitations? What don't you do, right? You want to make sure that you're not overcommitting and under-delivering for sure. You want to be able to ask each party of the team to what are your availability? What's your availability? What are the hours that you typically work? And even on top of that is talking about what's your communication style and preferences? What can we expect for you in terms of communication? When is the best time to connect with you and get a response from you? I know that we get busy in our everyday lives, both personally and professionally, and it's just one of these things that as much as people try to respond to all emails, texts, phone calls within a reasonable time, sometimes the work schedule just gets overwhelming in many cases. But I think it's still appropriate to be asking, hey, if you're having issues communicating with some of the team members, just asking them, hey, what is your preference? How can I best adjust my communication style to yours And really, again, that maybe starts with what are your hours and availability, and again, what's your preferred method to communicate. Another thing to be asking the different parties is, what do your services provide transportation, and could it potentially be used for employment in the future? So this does include family and friends. This does include residential providers. This does include service providers such as an employment program. And I think it's really interesting. I've worked with a lot of residential homes that have been absolutely fantastic. I've also worked with a few that they said, well, we can't support this person and drive them because we have a staffing issue. And as much as I respect that and understand that, I think that's also putting back on them the responsibility that, just because you have a staffing issue doesn't mean that this person can't be employed. And if you're giving transportation options to other individuals, can you give some transportation options to this? And again, you have to work with them to negotiate that out, but you have to work to really find out. To find that out, you really have to ask and bring that up as a topic point. And there's no better time to bring that up than team meetings and when you're getting to know everyone. So, again, we kind of went through all of this transition. You're going to get through transition schools, multiple perspectives from teachers and peers. You're going to get to know a lot of the things they've been involved in, the work experiences. We talked about back in the interest portion of this webinar, or the support needs, I apologize, the support needs section of this webinar. Hey, what have been the successful past experiences, right? What have we learned? So taking a closer look at those work experiences are always a helpful thing. The VRS staff are really going to help guide the employment process by developing an employment plan. And like I said before, it's really additional resources are going to be accessing additional training, education, or resources like a small business option. Case managers, their role is there to find services, navigate providers, and access the funding for those services once a job seeker or a consumer has found a service they want to attend and has availability. As I mentioned, again, the service providers include independent living, personal care attendants, day services, residential homes for residential support living apartments, foster, things of that nature. So I know I just covered all of this. I should have stuck with the slides. But as an IDT team, interdisciplinary team, I think it's just our job. How may we be a service to you? So often it's presented as, well, here are the services we have for you, and there you go, right? I think that's the wrong model or the wrong approach to have with the people that we're serving, is almost that they're fortunate to have the services being provided to them. I think it's our responsibility and our duty to say, how can we be a service to you, and how can we help you, and how can we work together as a team to help you achieve your goals. We really are servants of the people as we are in human services. And so I think that is such an important notion to think about as we move into what a person wants versus what the team wants. So number one thing is always ensuring that person has a voice in all the services that are being provided. A great and simple strategy for that is, again, during the team meetings, if possible, and to the person's comfort level, have the individual start the team meeting instead of the service provider, right? Have the individual to start introductions and introduce who they are. Oftentimes in the team meetings as well, we all as service providers have paperwork to comply with, and usually takes a large portion of these meetings. But we can often talk about the services that are happening before we get to that paperwork. So, hey, let's have a conversation about what's been going on in this person's life over the last year or the last 6 months or the last quarter, right? And let's start about all these great things and let them tell about their experiences and not speak for them. And so, again, I recognize that not everybody communicates verbally or feels comfortable communicating, but in whatever capacity that is, to share those experiences and what they enjoy and what they don't, I think takes precedence over our paperwork. And I know, well, we only have an hour, Josh. We only have an hour and a half. Well, as service professionals, I think it's our responsibility to set up the meeting, to have the appropriate amount of time to discuss this stuff. So if it is a combined meeting, let's say, for residential homes, annual meeting, and for the service provider, the employment provider, you're combining meetings. Hey, if your meeting is usually an hour and a half, and you combine it, make it 3 hours. I know that's not always convenient for all the professionals out there or all the members of the team, but again, we are here to provide these services, and we shouldn't take shortcuts on how we have these meetings, especially when a lot of times we only meet on a once a year sometimes. So make the time, set it up correctly. These are all simple strategies to really having a team-oriented approach from the get-go. So one of the things as well is when you're presenting information, it's not talking about them, it's talking to them. It's about giving them accurate information in a way that the person can understand to the best extent possible, so they can make an informed decision. So maybe they don't process information then the preferred method of learning isn't through, verbal comments. Maybe it's having information written down in bullet points for them, or just speaking about written information. Instead of a long document and all the paperwork that's 75 pages long, maybe we need to take a time to summarize that in bullet points and make that into a way that person can understand. Maybe it's using visual aids. Maybe it's using different charts. But I think it is our responsibility to, again, present that information, any information to that job seeker so they can best understand it, again, so they can make an informed decision. I also think it's part of our responsibility as a team to help explore new options and experiences to improve their independence and their quality of life. Again, this stems from getting to know this person, making sure they have a voice. And when you, as a team, collectively get behind this person and say, hey, we want to hear from you. And hey, yes, we have this portion of the meeting, the paperwork and stuff, but let's talk about, hey, what do you like? What has been the best part of your week? So let's break down that, right, what I just said. So it may just say, well, what do you like? And maybe that person doesn't then respond. They say, well, what do you like at your day program versus a residential? Maybe they don't still respond. Well, say, hey, on Mondays, what's your favorite activity in the morning? So you can always break that down a little bit more, again, to give that information, break down that question so you can get those answers from that individual as well, again, making sure they have that voice. Also, I just wanted to say that as professionals, our problems shouldn't become their problems. I brought up, let's say, staffing for an employment program or a day services program. And, hey, we're not able to meet with this person for a few weeks, or there's going to be a lapse in services for a little bit. It's looking at it from both perspectives. One is the reality of some of the challenges we have as professionals in our industry, like turnover in staff, like new compliances, like too many meetings. But also, with that being said, it shouldn't directly impact that person, at least not for an extended period of time. I think we can always come up with a timetable and solution, and we're able to communicate both of those things to that job seeker, to their team. And that's just a courtesy that I would expect from anybody that I work with, regardless if they have a disability or not, right? Hey, we understand the realities of life, and we understand that there's an issue, but what is the solution? What is the timetable? What is the communication going to look like? Those are all the basic strategies that we can implement to really ensure that we're taking a person-centered approach. Again, one of the biggest things, as I'm a talker myself, as you can tell, even during team meetings, sometimes I can dominate a conversation, or we can start talking to each other as service providers. Always defer back to the job seeker. If we're talking about that person, if you notice professionals talking about that person, maybe it's your job responsibility to say, okay, but Joe, what do you think about that, right? Making sure that they have an opportunity to chime in on whatever topic is at hand here. Also, just coordinating and communicating services in order to provide the best possible services. That's, of course, why we're working as a team. And so, yeah, let's gather our resources, let's identify what are all of our roles, how we can best contribute, how we can best collaborate, and let's put an action plan together and get this in motion. And then once we agree upon this plan, let's stick to it. I think that's sometimes the biggest issue is sometimes we do these team meetings, we sign our paperwork, and we move on. But let's get a plan together. We all want to have an impact. We all want to come to work and do great things. We all want to see these people that we're serving be successful. So let's develop a plan, let's agree upon it, and let's stick to it moving forward. So one of the things that I've been asked to talk about, of course, is the transportation options for Greater Minnesota and exploring different possibilities. And I want to just open this up by saying a quick disclaimer about this section. Minnesota APSE is merely exploring the possibilities of this topic of transportation. We're not experts on funding contracts or standards and or the requirements. All the contents of this topic is based off our own interpretation of what is written in some of the documentation. But as service providers and professionals, it's going to be your responsibility to read and interpret and to really check out to see if you're able to utilize this funding in this matter. So right now, we're really just riffing ideas and exploring possibilities. But with that being said, it's going to be about my idea is that for rural Minnesota, can fuel employment be funded by can we fuel employment by funding fuel? And part of that comes through the idea of, excuse me, I'll go back right there. Capitalizing more on the small town community by turning into perceived limitations into really advantages, right? Kind of the old carpool rideshare idea. Hey, if your town or area has 1,000 people and there's only a certain amount of businesses, well, we're probably going to know the majority of the people in that town and where they work, right? What are their hours? Can we start charting that? Can we start identifying these things? So potentially, could they get a ride from a coworker if set up correctly, right? Or maybe there's people looking for a little extra, an extra opportunity to get an extra funding stream in themselves. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But it's really tapping into one's own network and expanding upon it. Who's retired or who's available as a retirees, another great option for people. People for looking for part-time work that are willing to transport people. I know as a service provider, a manager of a service provider, we helped a young man with construction. He actually, we found him a job in construction, and we found out that two of his coworkers that he was going to be working with lived near him. And so we actually were able to utilize some of the funding streams to provide and to coordinate the transportation services. But we actually hired them on kind of as a contracted employee, and we also gave them a stipend pay via a fuel card, a gift card for gas, right? So we actually coordinated the services, arranged everything, ensured that all parties were understanding of what the expectations were to receive this. We were able to then, again, let's say buy a gift card at a gas station with X amount of money on it, give that to the person so they would pick them up in the morning and drop them off in the afternoon. And so that was a great option for this young man, and it worked out perfectly. Actually, when it was so helpful that two people lived close to him as well, as one person may be sick or have some time off, something like that, the other person would fill in. Or it also worked in many cases. Sometimes one person picked him up, while the other person dropped that person, the person off. So some different ideas there. But I think it's just about streamlining and the coordination of transportation, coming up with some of the backup plans. I think that when I look at the, if you haven't taken a look, you should look at the community-based service manual. Under here, we're going to explore some of the definitions and why this may be a possibility to do some of these things. and I'm just going to read right off the slide. I know that's a little dry, but I think it's home why we were able to do this. For employment, exploration, development, support, pre-vocational, and adult day services. For all of these service providers who provide transportation can do this if they build a waiver of transportation, if the trip is not associated with the beginning or end date of a DT&H. So a lot of time in DT&H type programs, the transportation is a separate line item, but kind of comes with that total package of going to that program for the day. So a service provider is able to bill this if the person is traveling to for the transportation time period to connect consecutive day and employment services, in-service transportation. So if this is a regular part of your services, you would not be able to bill for this. And you may not bill the waiver transportation for in-service transportation. The cost of in-service transportation is included in the regular rates that you would receive as a service provider. But with that being said, again, if this is for a community job, if this is going to be something that's not part of your services, this is why I think it's worth exploring and doing some further investigation on your part to see if certain things like ride shares, if hiring as a service provider some additional staff for just part-time transportation, or tapping into a natural resources of retirees or whatnot that may be interested in gas cards, some extra funding for themselves to get to and from work. So all great ideas. Really does, again, taking what is perceived as a limitation in a small community and turning it around into an advantage. And so, yeah, and I know it's been successful for myself and the program and the job seekers I've worked with as well. So, yeah, diving deeper into that, who does that tapping into the network? Who does the job seeker know? How is everyone connected? How does everyone else get to work? What are the routes that people take? Who takes them and when? And again, for myself, what I would do is start charting that. Even if it starts with a handful of people, start mapping that out and charting it, and not everyone's going to be an option. But if you don't ask, if you don't chart this, if you don't identify them, and then you don't ask, you're never going to know. So definitely take that into consideration. So finally here, we're going to be taking a look at the community-based service manual and really tying it back into the new employment services that are available here in Minnesota for individuals that want competitive integrated employment. I know that is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds here, a lot of people's agendas as service providers. And so we're just going to break down these new services one by one. So the exploration service is really just to help the person. It's really, so it used to be, I'll start with this. A couple years ago and for a long time, employment services were either DT&H funding or supported employment services, SES. And so the DT&H funding was the most intensive support somebody can get because it would be a Monday to Friday supports all through the day, where a supported employment program would be supported employment program would be a appointment-based services. And so the hard thing with the employment services as just SES on how it was designed was that there's actually kind of three tiers to the services, or three sequential steps to the services. And I think that's why the new regulations that came out really broke it down to be more concise about, how should I say, divvying up what services should fall into what category. So that's why we're going to jump into this. So for the employment exploration services, really this is just if somebody, let's say, is in a Senator-based program, or it can just be from the very get-go, coming out transition program. This service is going to help this person is going to help the person get a better understanding of what competitive integrated employment is all about and the opportunities that are going to be in his or her community. The employment development services is really going to be about individualized services designed to help a person achieve competitive integrated employment. And that would include self-employment, micro-enterprises, or a business within a business as well. So that's more of the job development phase, right? And then we have the employment support services. That's going to be more of the ongoing support. How do we individualize our service supports to help that person maintain paid employment within the community's business settings? And that's going to be not only that onboarding, orientation, acclimation process, but also going to be the long-term supports and how that person can not only just be successful in the immediate roles, but move and advance in the future and to learn new skills and advance to new jobs or new positions in the future. Like I said, the employment development services really can be with a micro business, a micro enterprise business, a commercial business with 5 or fewer employees, including an owner of business. And really, I think that we need to go over the definition of competitive integrated employment, which is employment that pays minimum wage or industry standard, customary or prevailing wages with comparable benefits, including health insurance, leave time, things of that. Well, that is going to be our goal for competitive integrated employment and why we're using these services options. So yeah, again, I think it's exciting that they came out and broke that one service known as support employment services into these 3 categories. It really helps us define what we're doing and helps that person take the sequential steps for success to find that right job and to be competitively employed. So with that being said, just to kind of go over the to go further into the employment development services, funding for direct contact with the job seekers. This is right into the community-based service manual. Check it out for yourself, but this is the stuff that you can fund for. Individual strength-based assessments and employment opportunities, including discovery strategies. This phase can exceed more than 120 days. You can get funding for supporting new employee orientations for up to 30 days after a person starts a new position at a job. Also, you can get paid funding for in-service transportation. You can also get funding for skills training to keep and to find a job and to keep a job, such as interviewing skills, community resources, resume writing, all those things you can have funding for to help the job seeker advance in those areas. And it's been great. It's so great that you can actually have funding to document the progress views and the reporting of meetings as well. One very cool thing about the new services working sequentially with each other is what I've heard is that in the past you've needed a new you've needed a new service agreement in place before you should be starting to provide these services. Now there's a 30-day window where those services can overlap. So let's say a person finds a job and they're moving into more of that support employment services. Instead of having to issue or request a new service agreement and have that service agreement in hand before providing services, now you have a 30-day window where those services can overlap. So really kudos to those who came up with these services, as it's made it a lot more functional for us service professionals to implement these services for our job seekers. So some more things that you can get funding for indirect services for employment is employment search and assistance support, looking up job leads, making those contacts, having those business meetings. You can have funding for benefits gathering, reviewing and analyzing the benefits and how having a job will impact how employment will impact those benefits. They're also going to have funding to help negotiate and finalize terms of employment, those negotiation pieces with the actual employer. And again, some of the cool things that you can now fund for: development of job applications, resumes, and cover letters, and the community outreach to businesses in general, developing those partnerships. So you can get paid for both those direct supports and those indirect supports moving forward. So with that being said, I just wanted to cover whether or not we reached all of our objectives here for this webinar. Of course, those webinars were to introduce what person-centered job development was all about. We were going to talk about, we have talked about strategies for developing whole team approaches to job development. We've talked about what are some strategies to really work as a team together and making sure what the person wants is taking the precedent over what the team wants. We also talked about some of the transportation ideas or options for rural Minnesota, getting creative with some potentially of those job shares or ride shares, things like that, maybe using a gas card. There's different creative ways for funding. Again, do your due diligence as a professional and ensure that you're able to utilize the funding in that capacity. And then we also connected all of this to the new employment services here in Minnesota and some of those funding streams. And we kind of broke down and went and reviewed what we can bill for, both direct contact with the job seeker and indirectly. So again, kudos to those who developed those employment services, because it really, again, has made things more sequential and easier to work with as professionals. So with that being said, this is not a live webinar. It originally was, so we had time for questions originally. But I just wanted to, before we conclude the webinar, I just wanted to say this webinar was made possible by Minnesota APSE. We will have a post-webinar evaluation form available, and if you'd be willing to take it, fantastic. We'll make sure that's accessible to all of you. We also want to let you know that our Minnesota State APSE State Conference is coming up this fall on Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. Save the date for that, and we'll get more information out. And then you can also find out more information on our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page as well. Please join us there for the latest information. And also join us. Please join us at Minnesota APSE by clicking the link below here. Get started. We're, again, happy to just start with a conversation, but we're excited if you're willing to take that next step and taking action to how we can better provide services for all the people that we work with. So with that being said, thank you for your time and your attention. And again, I hope this webinar has been informative. Be well and find jobs. And yeah, thank you so much.